Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode, free agency profile on Brian Burns. This is another topic that a patron had sent me and asking to do. We're going to be looking at Carolina Panthers edge rusher Brian Burns based on his pre-draft and post-draft data to determine his free agency value this offseason. Burns has been selected to 2 Pro Bowls in 2021 and 2022 since he was drafted in 2019, which is pretty impressive. But what has his actual production on the football field been based on advanced analytics? And also, what did he look like as a prospect coming out of college? Because that can a lot of times influence what they become in the NFL. So first off, you look at defensive market share. Defensive market share takes a look at the raw statistics that are transformed into market share scores, which are then compared to positional peers to give you a score. So for example, if an edge rusher had 4 sacks on a team that had 10 sacks, then he had 40% sack market share. You take that number, you compare it to every single prospect in the database to give you a score, and that's what the scores you're about to see are. Looking at his market share scores, Brian Burns had an 80 percentile solo tackle score, a 90 percentile sack score, and a 90 percentile tackle for loss score. All of those numbers are pretty much within range of what you would expect out of a Pro Bowl edge rusher at the position. And he's a little bit off of the all-pro area based on his solo tackle data, but he still was pretty darn close, and he did hit at least near the threshold for that specific metric. So these numbers are good. They're good numbers. And this is out of 1,799 edge rushers since 1989. Moving on to his other edge rusher market share data. This is like the extra production with him. He had a 90 percentile forced fumble market share score and a 69 percentile pass deflection market share score. So he was able to get forced fumbles. He was able to get pass deflections. All those things are nice to see. You know, he has extra stuff. He's not just a behind the line of scrimmage guy. He's able to affect the game in that capacity as well, as far as breaking up passes and getting forced fumbles. So those are all good marks. Moving on to his adjusted production scores, which adjusted production is the context for his production. Brian Burns, based on these numbers, so taking a look at his age, his strength of schedule, his strength of team. How productive was he for his age coming out? How productive was he for the team that he was on? And of course, how productive was he for the competition he was facing? And when you look at these particular numbers for him, he was elite in every single one. His age score was in the 98 percentile. His MSA rating, which doesn't take into account forced fumbles and pass deflections, was 98 percentile, and his pass score was in the 95 percentile. In many ways, he graded extremely high in terms of his contextual production coming out of college, which are all very good marks. Another thing to talk about is his athleticism data. Based on his explosive lower body strength score, his speed score, and his agility score, he pretty much scored 70 percentile in terms of explosiveness, 88 percentile in terms of speed for his size, excuse me, and then 80 percentile in terms of agility for his size. Based on the numbers at the position, he pretty much hit the Pro Bowl areas in terms of his athleticism, but didn't quite hit the All-Pro areas due to lackluster explosiveness, which comes to the point that he is a little bit undersized. Brian Burns coming out was 250 pounds. Now he might be bigger now, but when he came out of college, he was definitely kind of undersized for the position. So he hasn't necessarily. He might have done better with his athleticism if he was heavier. But these are kind of how his numbers are, and this is out of 1,275 edge rusher performances since the 1999 NFL draft class, at least when it comes to athleticism data. So he was a Pro Bowl athlete with Pro Bowl production. All those numbers are good for him. Now let's actually get to how he performed at the NFL level. So there's a couple metrics that I use in terms of looking at pass rushes at the NFL level. I look at the pass rush efficiency score. This score takes into account things like their sack percentage, how often when they rush the passer do they get a sack. It takes a look at their pressure percentage, how often they were on the football field did they get pressure. It takes a look at the sack/pressure or finish rate score. So you take the sacks, you divide it by the pressures, to give you how often when they pressured did they end up with a sack. Basically how often did they finish at the quarterback versus just getting pressure and not ending up getting the quarterback. And then of course the sack slash blitz or pure PR or pass rush score is a metric which takes a look at the sacks divided by the blitzes that they had on the team to kind of adjust for blitzes, because did he get the stats the hard way or the easy way? It's easier. I'm not going to say it's completely easy, because if you put me out there to blitz the passer, I may not do as well. But it's a little bit easier as a pass rusher to get the quarterback or pressure the quarterback or sack the quarterback when you're blitzing versus when you are got your hand in the dirt and you're going up against that offensive lineman, going up against that tackle or that guard. It's easier to get pressure and sacks when you don't have the blitz packages in your resume, I guess is the best way to put it, in your arsenal. So that's what that metric kind of looks at. And taking a look at Brian Burns in terms of this particular area here, he was pretty good. His efficiency was pretty much in the 80 percentile from 2021 to 2023. But as you can clearly see, based on his BLTZH score, which is basically the blitz heavy, or basically how heavy were his production for his blitz. It kind of adjusts for how much they blitzed him to kind of see how much of his stats could be influenced by blitzing. He scored pretty average in terms of the area. So a lot of his sacks were not necessarily all from blitzes, but he definitely was like in the middle. So blitzing did help his numbers out, is the best way to put it. So he's a pass rusher that kind of have to create things with him a little bit, because his efficiency was good but not great. Other things to kind of look at here, when you look at like his pressure percentage, for example, it's kind of a little lackluster, especially last year. And then of course when you look at just the general data here for him, I think that the consensus is just this, is that he is a good pass rusher based on his efficiency scores, but you need to create with him a little bit, because his numbers were definitely kind of inflated a little bit by his ability, your ability to kind of blitz him a little bit. Now, moving on to the tackle efficiency score. The tackle efficiency score at the NFL level takes a look at combined tackles and missed tackle percentage. So how many tackles did they get compared to positional peers, and then how many tackles did he miss compared to positional peers. When we look at his tackle efficiency, it's kind of a little bit all over the place, but he's pretty much in the 80 percentile in terms of that particular number here. His missed tackle percentage is about 51% compared to other edge rushers, so he's not exactly a sure tackler in terms of at the line of scrimmage and in space. So these are definitely some minor concerns in terms of his data, but that's kind of what he looks like in terms of his tackle ability. Moving on to the edge rusher data score, which is how I grade edge rusher prospects at the NFL level, is I take their pass rush efficiency score, I add in their tackle efficiency score, and then I add in the games that they played. Not necessarily starts, but just how many games did they play, because nowadays with the advent of rotational pass rushers and those other sort of things, you have to kind of take those things into account, that some teams may have a guy on their team who's like their best pass rusher but never really starts a game. That can happen sometimes. So this just takes a look at those things to kind of see, okay, how many games did he actually play in, and what was his impact on the football field in the games that he played. And based on his edge rusher data score, he's pretty much been 90 percentile in 3 out of the 5 seasons that he's played. Struggled a little bit his rookie year, but that's understandable. Most rookies do struggle their rookie year. And then, of course, he kind of had a down year in terms of his data in 2021. That didn't affect his ability to go to the Pro Bowl, though. But this is, of course, based on goobly gobbly advanced stat numbers that a lot of fans don't really care about. They just care about the PFF grades and the other stuff like that. But based on the statistical data that I've been able to collect from Pro Football Reference, this is what Brian Burns kind of looked like in terms of his data. and his rank as well, because last year in 2023 he was the 24th ranked pass rusher last year, 10th ranked in 2022, 30th in 2021. In 2020 he was the 6th ranked pass rusher overall. So his breakout realistically was in 2020, not 2021. But a lot of times people kind of catch up to defensive players. A lot of times their breakout season is a year before. It's just they didn't get a lot of publicity because obviously he plays with the Carolina Panthers. But his best year as a edge rusher, based on the data stuff that I do, was in 2020. It's just nobody, I guess, was paying attention to him. Moving on to the question I know a lot of you guys are going to say, which is, okay, Mr. Geometrics, taking a look at his data, maybe he wasn't as productive because teams were scheming for him. They made it harder for him to really make an impact because he was the only pass rusher for them, which I think, based on data, I know it's a film thing, believe me, it's a film thing, is somewhat true. When you look at Brian Burns, and this is based on the pass rushers that the Carolina Panthers have had while Brian Burns has been there, this is just the top people in that area. Brian Burns has been the top pass rusher for them for most of those years, with the exception of 2019 when they had Mario Addison, which that's a name that a lot of people forgot about. And of course, Hassan Reddick in 2021. Brian Burns has been the best pass rusher for them. Yetur Gross-Matos has not really done much on the other side based on his data either. So it's reasonable to say that Brian Burns is much more productive. It's just he played on a team where he was the primary threat on defense, so teams probably schemed things against him because they knew that, okay, all we got to do is game plan for Brian Burns and we'll be all right, which is a reasonable argument to make. So based on his data, it might be better if he played on a better football team, which is true. It's true for every player, really. Take a look at Randy Moss on the Raiders versus Randy Moss on the Patriots. But anyways, moving on to age impact score. This is a score I always tell people to pay attention to when they talk about free agents, because age does factor into impact. So this was a study I actually did back in 2018 where I looked at every single edge rusher. I did an impact production score. So I basically took their production and then added all the edge rushers from 2005 to 2018 to kind of see, okay, what was the impact score like based on age. And when I did this data, as you can clearly see, most edge rushers are kind of in that peak area from age 21 until about age 29. And then after age 29, you have a steep decline after that, if you will. So the good thing about Brian Burns is that he will be 26. So whatever team you sign him to, if you sign him to a 3-year or a 5-year contract, you pretty much are going to be expecting the same level of production he put up when he was a 21-year-old until now, or at least 22 until now, because his 21-year season wasn't really that great. But for the most part, when you look at the data here for age specifically, he is at a good spot age-wise, where if you draft him to a long-term contract, I don't think you should worry too much about the decline, the age decline specifically. It might be safer to just sign him to a 3-year contract versus a 5-year contract, because you don't want to be paying a bunch of money on the back end, which that's what a lot of teams do sometimes, is they backload contracts to when they get paid the most money, or at least salary-wise, when they're older, and by that time they usually cut them. But that's the biggest thing with him, is I would say age is not really a factor. So moving on. Next point. So this deals with Brian Burns' future outlook. Brian Burns profiles as a Pro Bowl edge rusher, but he has not been a consistently elite pass rusher based on his efficiency scores, and has been aided by blitzes to pump up his pass rush productivity. So this is the biggest question mark with Brian Burns. He's not Myles Garrett. He's not, and again, I'm not trying to compare somebody to like a Hall of Fame edge rusher, but he's not really even T.J. Watt. He is a pass rusher that benefits a lot from pass rush productivity, or at least I should say, blitzing. So when you have a pass rusher like that who kind of depends on blitzing to a certain extent to kind of get things done, that's a concern. You have to go, okay, I'm going to pay you all this money, but are you going to give me top 5 production? Because so far in Brian Burns' career, he's not sniffed top 5 production except for one season in 2020 where he ended up being the 6th best pass rusher that year, if you will. So I think when you look at the overall data for Brian Burns, that's my biggest concern is he really worth top end edge rusher money? I don't really think so based on his data because there are limitations to him based on his pre-draft profile. Because again, based on his pre-draft profile, he was a Pro Bowl pass rusher. He wasn't an All-Pro pass rusher. He wasn't an elite pass rusher. He was just a Pro Bowl pass rusher, a good pass rusher, a very, very good pass rusher, but not a elite edge rusher. So based on those parameters there, you don't really pay a guy like that top 10, top 5 money. So what do you pay him? Well, you pay him a top 12 to 16 salary. Based on the data work that I've done, if you do a 4.18 inflation adjustment, which is a 5-year inflation average for the last 5 years on the average salary for a top 12 edge rusher, that comes out to about $24.5 million per year on the upper limit based on his data for a top 12 to 16 pass rusher, because that's what he is. I think ultimately, if you really believe in his talent and you think that he's going to meet the expectation of being what he's consistently been in the NFL for the last 5 years or a little bit better, then you should see him as a top 12 to 16 pass rusher, above average edge rusher, if you will, in the NFL, especially in terms of a starter. But do you pay that guy $40-50 million a year or $30 million a year? No. You're going to pay him what he's really worth, which is where kind of the Moneyball stuff comes in, which is based on his production, based on what he looks like as a pre-draft prospect and as a post-draft prospect. He kind of looks like a top 12 to 16 type guy, and that's what you should pay him. Are they going to pay him like that? No, because every time free agency comes around, teams get desperate and they overpay for their players. But that's kind of the way things are right now. Also, in terms of team fits, this is the last sort of thing. I think the best team fits for him are likely guys like Kansas City, the Giants, Arizona, Tennessee, Jacksonville, Houston, Tampa Bay, New England, Seattle, Denver, Atlanta, Minnesota, the Jets, Miami, the Rams, Dallas, Pittsburgh Steelers, and Baltimore. Basically, teams that utilize a lot of blitzing in terms of what they do on the football field, based on how they performed last year. So they may change up things this year. There may be some teams that change up their defenses and go to more like a blitz heavy kind of package type system. I think after the Super Bowl, a lot of teams are going to do that because of Steve Spagnuolo. But that's kind of what Brian Burns is, guys. Again, great pass rusher. Don't get me wrong. Really good pass rusher. A guy that is a top 12 to 16 pass rusher in the NFL. Your team would love to have that guy on the team. But at the same time, would you want to pay him top 5, top 3 money or top 1 money when he's never really going to live up to that based on his past performances and based on what he's actually done in the NFL? So that's the biggest thing with him is I don't necessarily think he's going to be able to meet these metrics based on how I grade players anyways, based on the production metrics of statistics, to meet the expectation of that level of player. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Jim Coburn. Check out my other work at Gymmetrics on Twitter at JIMETRICS. Also check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/JCoburn. Be sure to join my Patreon as well if you want to get access to new stuff that comes out a little earlier than everybody else. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!